Welcome back to Peak Performance Radio Podcast. Today we'll be speaking to Gregg Swanson, owner of Warrior Mind Coaching and Training. Gregg has an extensive background as an NLP practitioner, as a certified instructor, and as a business owner for quite an extensive period of time, over 20, 30, it looks like in total almost 20 years in walking in this type of line of work. He has a very diverse background, has actually recently created a new certification, which hopefully we'll elaborate a little bit more later in this call. But I just want to jump right into this, Gregg, and I'm going to ask you the first question that I ask every single person, which is, when you hear peak performance, what do you define that as?
Well, first, I'd like to just thank you, Marcelo, for the opportunity to come on your podcast. You're doing great work out there, helping people reach their peak performance, either mentally, physically, and I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. So peak performance, the way I look at it is we all have a potential. We all have an innate potential of more than we're capable of. And, peak is the top of it, so it's top. What happens is we have limiting beliefs and ideas and thoughts that hold us back. So we kind of hit our heads on this resistance. And when we can break through this mental resistance, we can hit that peak performance, and that peak performance is performing at our highest level, regardless of what it is. If it's a mom, it's performing at her highest level with the amount of turmoil or chaos that's going around her. It's as opposed to sitting down and giving up. If it's a personal trainer, it's handling that client one more time. It's having that mental strength to go through it and keep pushing through that mental resistance, so that they will hit that peak performance. Did that address the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question, and It's really often defined by the individual's industry as well as their experience. So it's always unique to the eye of the beholder, the individual that chooses to define it the way they do. We could always defer to Webster's dictionary, but it never really is the same answer all the time. That's what I love about that term.
Right.
And
basically what happens is many people think peak performance is when they hit that mental resistance. They're hitting it. So this is all I can do. This is how many sales I can make. This is how many swings I can do. This is how fast I can run. They hit that mental resistance. That's not peak performance. Peak performance is moving past that and going into the potential. And so many of us think we're hitting peak performance, but what we're doing is we're hitting our set point. That's not peak, because it's, peak performance includes the potential that you are capable of doing. And so often we all hold ourselves back from that potential.
You are right. It's kind of there's been many books written on it in talking about is that really your limit. And I think that's the limiting factor of our psyche, really. It's to be human. We often set boundaries that are not real boundaries. That being said, what are some books that you've read that have impacted your life in your career and in just this mindset type of strategy?
Okay, I'll leave out the fitness books. I'll let you cover all that on another topic. One, actually, it's a good old and true one is Think and Grow Rich. I mean, when you take Napoleon Hill's classic book and dig down into it, a lot of his stuff was so far ahead of its time that it's now just being accepted for more than what it is. That would be one of them. Another great book is Zen in the Martial Arts. It was about some interviews with Bruce Lee on that one. Another one, Science of Mind. Ernest Holmes wrote that one. And I'm currently involved in a really fantastic book. I'm actually involved with his training, a Dr. Joe Dispenza. He was in the movie What the Bleep, and he has a fantastic book out called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
That's pretty cool. I never heard that book, and that's something that I'm going to put on my list.
Yeah, it is awesome. He does a fantastic job of talking about how really are, for most of us, again, these are general statements, and there's always some shining stars that aren't in that general population, but basically that we are driven by our emotions. And my model is thinking leads to feelings, leads to actions, leads to results. Well, what happens, and Joe Dispenza talks about, is that our emotions drive our thinking, which drives our behavior, which drives our results. And our emotions are always based in the past because we couldn't have an emotion that we didn't know, so they're mainly based in the past. So when we start thinking based on emotions that are in the past, we do the same behavior, we get the same results, but somehow we think we should get something different. So he goes through how to break the tie of the emotions coming first in the thinking.
That's really interesting. And it makes logical sense if really people take a step back and understand that it's the whole, not the part, that is the solution. It's the whole thing. Kind of getting on a philosophical tangent, but principally it's very sound as well. That being
right,
said,
and he also goes into talking about how these emotions release chemicals in our body,
yes,
and our body becomes addicted to these chemicals. So although we may say, oh, I'm going to think positive today, once we start doing that, if we haven't really changed ourselves internally, the body goes through withdrawals and says, oh, hey, where's these chemicals? And it sends a message up to the brain, and the brain goes, okay, I'll think a negative thought and release the chemicals, and then you're all back to the same old place.
Yeah, and it's a cycle that it either could be a very good or a negative thing, and that's really where people need sometimes help in breaking that.
Right.
When that being said, who are some people that have impacted you to your success, to you being a successful owner and a person who's aspiring to strive for the best?
Wow, that's a great question, because there's so many people, right? Each year there's a new person, or each 2 to 3 years. Like right now, the guy, Joe Dispenza, I'm working with him to be a certified trainer with him. But I would say, whether it's the fitness world, the two biggest ones are Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. I mean, regardless of their personal lives, whatever else, when you start looking at them, they had this mental strength that they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I think with mindset, Dennis Waitley, he used to work with Olympic athletes and astronauts for mindset. Harv Eker from Peak Potentials. Robert Schuller, of all people, was a great. I think his son is taken over. He runs a church in Southern California. Napoleon Hill, obviously, and I think some great honorable mentions here would be Bruce Lee, Miyamoto Musashi, who wrote the Book of Five Rings. I probably pronounced his last name wrong.
Book.
Yeah. Steve Hayes. He was one of the first Occidental American quote ninjas that worked with Hatsumi. He has some very, very good books out that combine body, mind, spirit. And then there's one other, the Seth. So there's kind of books and individuals. The Seth teachings is kind of metaphysical, but that's great teachings as well.
So you've picked these icons really in life. Has there been any putting the icons together and putting the books together? Have there been any breakthroughs that you feel are significant to share with us, how do you put it together? Because if you look at it, each person that you just identified had different impacts on your life at different times. How did that happen with the books and the individuals? Can you share a little bit more about that? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yep. Yeah. This subject might create another conversation either offline or during this time. But I think all of this came together, or a lot of it came together, when I was climbing Mount Rainier back in, I think it was 89, if not, no, 98, I'm sorry, 98, and was caught in an avalanche. Myself and 10 other people were caught on an avalanche on Mount Rainier, hanging off the edge of the cliff. I ripped my PCL and broke my hand and had to hang on the edge of it, dehydrated, hypothermic, for about 8 hours before a helicopter could land about a mile away for all of us to kind of shimmy ourselves up this precipice up to a way to walk back. And without getting into all the details now, while I was sitting there, one, I had to be physically in great shape to, one, climb that mountain and then also withstand the dehydration, hypothermia. I had to be emotionally in great shape, because when you lose it emotionally on a mountain with a team hanging off your belt, basically, everybody's going to die. And then mentally had to really get very strong with that, because as I was walking down to the helicopter, as your PCL is torn, it keeps your knee from hyperextending. So every single time I put my right leg down, it would hyperextend backwards. So walking a mile with a hyperextended knee every single time, mentally you just had to suck it up through the pain. And then spiritually, it was knowing that there's a bigger purpose, and knowing that, to make it through here, there's going to be something else for me in life.
Wow. That's, you hear these books written, these movies done, and, that for me sounded like an excerpt out of a Bryson book. It's amazing story there. You talked about being fit and being on this mountain. What's your regimen like as far as working out goes, and do you use any specific technology in your workouts or in anything you would recommend?
My workouts vary depending on my goals, right? So if I was climbing a mountain, which I haven't climbed for a little bit of time, I would probably do 2 a days with a lot of anaerobic threshold training in the afternoon. Right now, I basically do a little bit of a high intensity Ignite 360 CrossFit style. My technology, whether it's the apparatus, so I use kettlebells, I'll use Bulgarian bags, Basu balls, whatever is available, I will use to whatever extent I can. As far as technology to record stuff, I'm still old school. I'll write it down on a pad and paper, my sets, my reps, my weight that I did, and then I'll come back and transfer it to a program or a spreadsheet. And I just like to, if I could take a second about the importance of keeping track, because whether it's making sales calls, whether it's fitness, whether it's whatever it is, if we don't keep track of what we're doing and the results we're getting, how do we know we're getting any better? How do we know what to improve? How do we know what we're doing is actually working? And so it's essential, no matter what. If you have a goal for a specific fitness level, if you have a goal for a specific sales level or a business level, tracking what you're doing and quantifying the results is absolutely essential.
I have a little saying that I was told one time by a manager of mine, and it basically said what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
And I later heard another phrase saying that data is not accidental, and I so agree with your concept because people sometimes measure for measurement's sake and don't really know what they're measuring, or sometimes fail to comprehend that all data is important, but only measure what is meaningful and can be used. Mm-hmm. So, when you measure your activities and measure your workouts and do your types of workout styles, have you learned unique methods of identifying meaningful numbers?
Yeah, and what I use is, and I coach on this as well, is I use the SMARTer goals. A lot of people heard of SMART goals, right? Specific, mm-hmm. measurable, achievable, time-bound. And that's what people stop with, right? They write their SMART goals. Oh, I'm going to weigh this much by this time, boom. They fold up the paper, they put it away. Well, I use ER at the end of it. E is to evaluate what you're doing. So we have to look at, basically you're going to look at your results, and the R is to revise either the goal or what you are doing. And so when you use a smarter goal system, and you really dive into it and use it effectively, the numbers that you will be using will be applicable for that specific goal, so the individual will adhere to them. But the SMART goal is great, but a lot of people just put the paper away. But when you have the ER at the end of it, making it a smarter goal, you now can evaluate what you are doing and the results you're getting. And then the R is, if you need to, revise what you're doing or revise the goals. And that helps with coming up with some specific numbers.
That's really that's something really informative that I hope everyone understands. You took something, a common analogy that's used in training in many different industries, and kind of put a nice upgrade to it. It's the first actually time that I've heard it. I like it. It makes sense because it that reevaluation is something that often is missed in establishing goal-setting programs and methodologies. We often need to understand that needs to happen more often.
Exactly.
So all this that you've kind of shared so far, if someone was coming into the industry, or someone was asking you, how do I do this? How do I get to where you're at? What would you recommend to them?
Wow. That's kind of a great, long, open-ended question. Part of it, I would say, is, so if it's combining the body and mind, we've all heard about mind, body, spirit, and if you go to some of the books that I've read, or take NLP training, or take coaching training, whatever else, the very most important thing is be prepared to experiment on your own life. Don't be a scientist with somebody else's life, telling them what to do and helping them while your life is falling apart, or you're getting overweight, or you're whatever it might be. You need to be able to have the mental strength and the courage to experiment with your own life first until you start seeing the results. Because the thing is, with all the information out there worked for the person who wrote it. Because they had a different mindset, they grew up differently, they had a different set of parents, they had a different set of education, so their whole infrastructure is completely different than yours. So the key is to take some information that you get, whether it's Think and Grow Rich, NLP, even kettlebell training, whatever. Apply it to your own life and see what the results you get. Don't blindly follow something. Yeah, in the beginning you need to do something so you get feedback. So, whatever course you're taking, do it exactly the way it says. See what feedback you get. Does it work for you? If not, change it up a little bit and see why it's not working and why it is working. But first, you have to have the courage to experiment on your own life before you go out and mess around with somebody else's.
what you're basically addressing there is the applied research that most people fail to do, and they also have to, before you teach anything, you should know it. And I often see this in the training world where someone will teach, as an example, you brought up kettlebells. They'll sit there and teach a Turkish kettlebell. They'll teach a snatch, and they never went through the proper teaching mechanisms and the process of breaking up those segments and teaching proper mechanical movement. And that's kind of the whole thing there when you're talking about teaching or instructing someone in taking the steps of evolution, is to take each segment but also take it and make it your own. When you kind of said that before, what else would you do besides taking it and making your own, and what would be some other things that you would recommend? Obviously, the reading material that you shared with us already, and some of the icons, understanding how they impact your choices. What are some things that, from owning your own business, what would you recommend to someone saying, hey, how do I make it? How do I be successful?
Right. And I'll address that in a second. I just want to come back to that knowledge, right? Because reading a book, taking a seminar, knowledge without experience is just information. And there's way too many individuals that'll read a book, that'll read a fitness book, that'll read an NLP book, that'll read something and think they understand it. They may understand it from a logical level, but it's just information. They have to apply that directly to their life. So knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. So without the experience behind it, it's just information. So again, no matter what a person does, whatever they read, you cannot learn how to do a martial art kick or something from just reading. You have to go and do it. So it's just information without the experience. It's wisdom when they're both combined. So with that, one of the things is, so to start a coaching business or a mental strength business or some of those other things, is one of the key factors is if you're already employed, and I don't know if this is going to address your question, Marcelo, but one of the things is people want to jump from job to job or career. They want to be an entrepreneur. They want to do these several things. If you're in a job, stay with it. Start a transition. Stand on both sides of the line of entrepreneurship and working in your current job if that's what you have. And one of the things, I do have a weekend workshop where I work with people individually to lay a plan out for that. But what happens is a lot of people get sick of their job, or they'll see you and aspire to be what you're doing, Marcelo, or they'll see myself or somebody else. They'll quit their job and go do it, and they don't have the savings, they don't have the education, they don't have the experience, the wisdom to start the business. So what I encourage folks to do is, if they don't like their job, look at it as their own personal bank that's going to fund their new business. So the reason why they go to work now is to create revenue so that they can fund their own business. And at night or on the weekend, start to do the reading of, we'll just say NLP. Go to an NLP training for a weekend, and then start to apply the concepts of that to your own life, and then to some folks' life, and see how that's going. But don't leave that job, because that job is essential. It's paying for your bills. It's paying for things, regardless of how bad you think you don't like it. It's now a revenue generating source to help you with your business. So if you're in a job, don't quit it. Slowly transition. Take one step at a time. If you're going to be a fitness trainer and you want to do a life coach also, pick one thing first. What's important now? In the Army or the military uses that acronym, WIN. What's important now? We all may want to have many certifications and get knowledgeable on mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical parts, you take one thing and do that and become really great at it, and then add on to it and add on to it. Did that help out, or was I way off course on that?
No, you were spot on. You were spot on. It's exactly what I think people need to understand in becoming successful, is having a plan and understanding that that plan is built upon outcomes, and you just don't take step one and take a leap to step 10. You have to plan that process, and if you don't plan that process, the outcome is not exactly always desired. And that really what people need to understand, what you just shared, was very important, because people sometimes will take a step in thinking that yes, it's the right thing, but it's a timing thing, and it's not built in a weekend. It's not built in a day. It's built over a period of time where you have things in place where you can take that leap forward. It just doesn't happen right away. It takes time to build something that's there to last. And so what you just shared with us, there's some really good bits of information there that I hope people understand. You recently launched a new certification for fitness professionals, and we were kind of talking about it before the call started. Can you share with us some of the new things that you're doing so people are aware and they can find out a little bit more about this as well?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking that, Marcelo. I appreciate it. I've been a certified personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach for well over 25 years. I mainly did it for my own knowledge. I helped some clients, but that fitness is more my personal passion. Mindset is my passion I bring to the world. So when I got certified in coaching through several organizations, I really like the process of coaching people. It's not therapy where you go into the past and resolve issues about your burnt teddy bear or something like that, and it's not telling people what to do. Often people involved in the fitness industry think that coaching is what the head coach does on a football or basketball team or lacrosse team. They tell the players what to do, how to do this. So many strength and conditioning coaches and personal trainers think that coaching is telling the client what to do. And for technical moves, lunges, kettlebell swings, snatches, whatever, that is important. You need to be able to tell them, to give them verbal cues on how to execute it. But what happens is personal trainers are asked to be more and more and more involved with their clients' lives, by their clients. And so the client may come in with some mental resistance about the diet's not working, or this isn't working, or they come up with 1,000 excuses, and this is this mental resistance that they're hitting. So they're hitting this mental resistance. They're coming in and sharing it with the trainer. The trainer doesn't know how to address it, so they just say, well, suck it up, or do this, or they give them instructions. And the clients don't want instructions because they're already at that, hitting that mental resistance. So this certification, this mental strength coaching certification, is broken up into 3 compartments. The first one is personal coaching, is understanding the process of personal coaching and how to and some of the aspects of it, how to communicate with your client effectively so that they come up with their solutions, so that they can break through those mental barriers, how to challenge them in a very positive way so that they will break through that. The middle part of it is based on basically neuro-linguistic programming, so it goes into the mind about how we communicate with ourselves, how we have perceptions about things, that when we have perceptions, it's like blinders, and we only let in what agrees to our perception. So if a person thinks, oh, I have fat genes, I can't lose any weight, they're going to find all the evidence out there to support it. Well, when we can, as trainers, challenge that with some other contrary information, we begin to loosen up those beliefs, those blinders, so that the client will be more receptive and go, maybe this isn't the case, and so I can start losing this fat, and then their behavior changes with it. And the third section is the mental strength part, which is based on the Navy SEALs protocols as well as Olympic athletes, which we've all heard about, but not really using that effectively. The first one's goal setting. Really how to set goals for your clients, how to work with them, and what we talked about, the smarter goals. Visualization. Most people think visualization is just having a picture in their mind, and is so much more than that. If you're just doing a picture in your mind, nothing's going to change. Energy management. If you're down, how do you get up? If you're up too high, how do you get down to a workable level? There are times with athletes and individuals can be so excited, they have too much adrenaline, and they will overextend themselves during a workout or a training program. And then self-talk is the fourth part of it. And self-talk is one of those things that many people, the clients, aren't aware of until somebody asks them the right questions to bring out what are they saying to themselves during the training, what are they saying to themselves as they walk into the gym, what are they saying to themselves, oh, this sucks, I wish I was home having a cake. You know, what are those things happening that either are supportive or not supportive? So the certification takes you through how to be a coach, how the mind works, and how to apply these mental strength tools.
You know, it's unique. It's the first of its kind that I've heard. Oftentimes that's kind of on-the-job training for a lot of us, and that's something that some people develop and learn, or some in what I used to always refer to as an intangible skill, because you have to have an emotional intelligence to deal with certain people with certain types of, for lack of a better description, disabilities, excuse me. So, you know, you hear my comments on that. Do you feel like it's intangible? Can it be learned? Can that be actually, in theory, can you actually teach some other people that have coping mechanisms?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We are magnificent species, the human species. We can learn almost anything. Some people have a different learning process, right? So now we're going into how does somebody learn? Is it visual? Is it auditory? Is it kinesthetic? So people who don't learn one way may learn another way. But the question is, yes, anybody can learn that. What happens is those who acquire it naturally, how many years have they had to get feedback from clients, or clients leaving them to go, oh, that wasn't a good thing to say, I'll say this next time, right? They go back and forth, back and forth. How much how much revenue have they lost, and how many clients have given up on themselves because at that point the strength and conditioning coach or the trainer or whatever perhaps said the wrong thing, pushed them too far, wasn't able to that. So some people will get that feedback and adjust and continue, but how long has it taken, and how many clients have been affected? This program is to help shorten that learning curve so that the trainer, the coach can, and this is even actually great for business managers, business owners. I go into all of the details on that, but you know, how great is it to shorten that cycle and be different than the other trainer out there, be able to ask those great questions or be able to point out those great patterns that they see in the client so that client has that aha and stays with that trainer or coach for another 12 sessions, 18 sessions, a full year. So it can be learned.
I hope people really understand that. How do what's the URL of this certification?
mentalstrengthcertification.com.
That's awesome. So, you know, that kind of wraps up our call. And first of all, I want to actually invite you to come back on and to have kind of an expanded conversation on some of these mental techniques that you shared with us on this call, to elaborate on some things as far as mental toughness and some things such as self-talk, to help people kind of understand further methods to train and use on becoming and striving for peak performance.
Well, absolutely, I would love to. Would really enjoy it. I think we could have probably a few of them. You have a great background, so you have a great understanding, Marcelo, about what I'm discussing, and you have had real-life experience personally, and you've had real-life experience with clients, and you've had real-life experience with family. So I think we could have just a wonderful discussion.
Awesome. So stay tuned, folks. We're going to be having another conversation with Gregg Swanson, and I look forward to catching up with you next time. Thank you again for joining me, and